Join me as I dig deep into the mysterious circumstances surrounding Virginia Giuffre's death and see if I can uncover the truth behind the headlines. Virginia Louise Roberts Giuffre was born on August 9, 1983, in Sacramento, California. From an early age, she confronted unspeakable trauma. Abused by a family friend in her preteen years, she later said that violation lit a fire in her, a determination that would carry her from the darkest corners of her past onto the world stage. In 2002, she married her high school sweetheart, Robert Giuffre, and together they built a life in Florida before relocating in 2014 to a sprawling farm in near Gabby, Western Australia, seeking privacy and healing. But on the afternoon of April 25, 2025, that sanctuary became a scene of tragedy. Emergency crews arrived to find Virginia unresponsive. Major crime detectives secured the property and, after a thorough on-site examination, confirmed there were no signs of third-party involvement. Western Australia police tersely noted, "At this stage, this death is not considered suspicious," while her family released a statement that echoed around the globe. "It is with utterly broken hearts that we announce Virginia passed away last night. The toll of abuse became unbearable." Yet to understand how we arrived at this tragic endpoint, we must trace the unlikely journey of a young girl who refused to stay silent. Raised in Florida, Virginia endured betrayal by those meant to protect her. She described her childhood as a relentless cycle: isolation, manipulation, and fear. By 16, her world fractured again when Ghislaine Maxwell allegedly recruited her into Jeffrey Epstein's orbit. In her early memoir excerpts, she recounted attending parties at Epstein's Palm Beach mansion and witnessing the calculated grooming of vulnerable teens. She was moved between properties, from New York apartments to Caribbean islands, where the lines between hospitality and exploitation blurred. When Epstein's shocking 2008 plea deal allowed him to serve fewer than 13 months behind bars for charges many felt were far too lenient, Virginia's outrage crystallized. She watched as powerful figures tacitly shrugged at the deal's secrecy, and in 2014 she resolved to go public. Her decision carried immense personal risk, the threat of retaliation, social stigma, and intense media scrutiny. Yet she went on record, first with anonymous interviews, then by name in a 2015 deposition, setting the stage for her landmark activism. Her nonprofit, initially called Victims Refuse Silence and later rebranded SOAR, Support Our Adolescents and Refugees, launched in late 2015 with two core missions: fund trauma-informed care for survivors and lobby for tougher laws against sex trafficking. In the first year, SOAR raised over $1.2 million, establishing residential programs in Florida and New York. By 2023, it had helped more than 150 survivors secure safe housing, vocational training, and legal representation. Each success story, whether a young woman earning her GED or a family escaping a trafficking ring, became a testament to Virginia's belief that every survivor deserved a second chance. But it was her courtroom confrontations that riveted the public. In July 2019, after Epstein's death in custody, Maxwell stood trial. Virginia flew to New York to provide critical testimony, describing in chilling detail Maxwell's role in recruiting and transporting underage girls. Jurors heard how Virginia had been threatened if she spoke out, how agents of Maxwell tracked her movements, and how her every lawsuit was met with stonewalling tactics. When the jury returned a guilty verdict in December 2021, Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, a landmark victory that many credited to Virginia's courage. And then came Prince Andrew. In August 2021, after months of private negotiation, Virginia filed her civil lawsuit in the Southern District of New York, accusing Britain's second son of engaging in sexual acts with her when she was underage. Andrew's legal team labeled the claims false and without foundation, but the deposition transcript painted a stark picture. Claims of forced encounters, travel itineraries matching Giuffre's testimony, and the notorious photograph of the two at Maxwell's London townhouse. With public opinion shifting against him, Andrew agreed in February 2022 to a settlement reportedly worth $12 million, donated to SOAR, and issued a statement expressing regret for the fact that she had to endure these terrible experiences. No admission of liability was made, but his subsequent loss of royal patronages, removal of military titles, and withdrawal from public duties spoke volumes. Even as these legal battles unfolded, Virginia's personal life grew increasingly complicated. On March 31st, 2025, she shocked followers with an Instagram post claiming her car had been struck by a school bus traveling at high speed, leaving her with kidney failure and a prognosis of 4 days to live. That vivid detail, 4 days to live, became an unsettling headline. Local police later clarified the incident was a minor crash with no serious injuries, and medical records noted she received short-term treatment for renal complications before being discharged. Amid this confusion, she was also embroiled in a bitter family law dispute. Her estranged husband filed a family violence restraining order, accusing her of verbal threats during their separation. Virginia vehemently denied the allegations, calling them malicious attempts to derail my advocacy and silence me. Court records show the hearing, scheduled for April 9th in Perth Magistrates Court, was repeatedly postponed at her request, due to health concerns. Just days later, a 2019 tweet resurfaced in a screenshot shared by conservative commentator Benny Johnson. "In no way, shape or form am I suicidal. I have made this known to my therapist and GP. If something happens, to me, please protect my family. Too many evil people want to see me quieted." The tweet's authenticity remains unverified. Her verified X account bears no trace of it, and some digital forensics experts suggest it may have been deleted or fabricated. Yet its misspellings and raw urgency have fueled a firestorm. House. Republicans Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene seized on it, demanding an immediate investigation and alleging credible threats against her life. Critics counter that amplifying an uncorroborated screenshot only fans conspiracy theories. But whether the tweet was real or not, it underscored the precariousness of Virginia's reality, and how rapidly suspicion can eclipse fact in the digital age. On February 27th, amid these personal and legal maelstroms, Attorney General Pam Bondi released Phase 1 of the declassified Epstein files. Hundreds of pages, flight logs listing VIP passengers, redacted witness interviews, banking records, were unveiled to public scrutiny. Conservative influencers who received early access to the Epstein Files Phase 1 binders found little new, footnotes pointing to documents already in the public domain, interviews with now discredited witnesses, and opaque evidence lists with names blacked out. Bondi lambasted the FBI's New York field office for withholding documents and vowed that Phases 2 and 3 would deliver the remainder. Yet critics from both ends of the political spectrum decried the release as a bureaucratic stall tactic, one that risked eroding public trust further. Meanwhile, in Canberra, the Australian Centre to Counter Modern Slavery issued a statement lamenting that Virginia's death strikes at the heart of our collective efforts against trafficking. Survivors and advocacy groups flooded social media with the hashtag #SoccerSoreForVirginia, pledging donations in her honor. Chanel Miller, a fellow survivor and author of Know My Name, tweeted, "We must honor her by never letting her fall into obscurity. We owe it to her legacy to carry on." In London, MPs on the Home Affairs Select Committee called for renewed scrutiny of Prince Andrew's settlement, invoking parliamentary privilege to demand answers that the civil suit's confidentiality had obscured. In Washington, Senator Lindsey Graham introduced the Epstein Accountability Act, which proposes lifetime GPS tracking for convicted traffickers, enhanced funding for victim services, and mandatory federal oversight of plea deals in sex trafficking cases. Representative Nancy Pelosi backed the bill, calling it one small step toward justice for Virginia and the thousands she represented. Back on her near Gabby farm, plans are already underway for a memorial service. Friends describe a simple gathering. Survivors and supporters will light candles at dusk, share stories under the gum trees, and lay wildflowers by the weathered fence where Virginia once watched her children play. In New York City, a parallel vigil will unfold outside the Thurgood Marshall U.S. Courthouse, the very steps where she stood, demanding accountability from the world's most powerful. Her children, now ages 12, 15, and 18, are left to navigate adolescence without their mother's guiding hand. SOAR has announced a scholarship fund in her name, offering them educational support through college. Several universities have committed to providing free counseling and grants to survivors in her honor. Legal teams have volunteered pro bono services for the family's ongoing matters, from the unresolved restraining order case to potential estate issues. And yet, as the world watches, conspiracy theories swirl. Fringe websites claim forensic evidence was tampered with, Some videos purport to show inconsistencies in the timeline of emergency calls. Hashtags like "warmaishag she did not kill herself" resurface nightly in trending topics. Major crime investigators maintain that forensic pathology has revealed no signs of external trauma, and toxicology reports remain confidential pending the coroner's inquest. But with public trust at a nadir shaken by the legacy of Epstein's own unexplained death in 2019, many remain unconvinced. So what happens next? Will the upcoming coroner's inquest in Western Australia bring transparency, or will it descend into procedural red tape? Can survivors leverage Virginia's legacy to enact meaningful legal reform, or will her story fade into footnotes in a headline cycle? Will the DOJ follow through on Bond's promise of full file releases, or will phases 2 and 3 remain as enigmatic as phase 1? Virginia Giuffre's life and her death remind us that the battle against sexual violence is far from over. Her unflinching testimony forced institutions to reckon with their failures. Her nonprofit empowered survivors to reclaim their agency. Her final public warnings, whether authentic or not, laid bare the dangers that accompany speaking truth to power. In the end, her legacy will be defined by what we do now. Will we honor her by demanding every final document be unredacted? By passing legislation that closes loopholes exploited by traffickers? By ensuring that no survivor ever feels compelled to choose between silence and safety? Share your thoughts below. Let's keep her story alive and prove that every voice, once raised, has the power to light the way forward. Because if there's one thing Virginia Giuffre taught us, it's that truth carries a cost, and that cost can be heartbreakingly high. But it's a price some are willing to pay so that others need never pay it again. Stay with me, because this story is far from over. Global ripple effects beyond legal and political arenas. Virginia Giuffre's death has galvanized international bodies dedicated to ending human trafficking. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime issued a statement affirming its commitment to honor her legacy by accelerating the implementation of the Global Plan of Action Against Trafficking in Persons. Member states are now being urged to submit progress reports ahead of the upcoming UN Human Rights Council session in July, and draft resolutions are already circulating in New York and Geneva. NGOs such as Polaris Project and Walk Free have pledged to dedicate sections of their next annual reports to Giuffre's work, highlighting her methods for survivor-led outreach and trauma-informed care that have become best practice models worldwide. Meanwhile, the Council of Europe's GRITA monitoring group is planning a special review of trafficking prevention measures in Commonwealth nations, citing Australia's handling of Giuffre's case as a test of both legal safeguards and witness protection protocols. Early drafts of the report recommend mandatory training for rural law enforcement officers on recognizing subtle signs of coercion, an initiative directly inspired by Virginia's advocacy for survivors in remote areas, where isolation often compounds vulnerability. Media reverberations. In the weeks since her passing, a wave of journalistic projects has emerged. Netflix has fast-tracked production of a 4-part docu-series tentatively titled Silent No More: The Virginia Giuffre Story, featuring exclusive interviews with her family, attorneys, and fellow survivors. Production insiders suggest the series will delve into never-before-seen deposition footage and diary entries, with an expected release in late 2025. Concurrently, the New York Times has announced a multi-article investigation into the remaining Epstein-era documents, promising to track which redacted names correspond to high-profile locations and financial records. Podcast networks are also dedicating limited-run series to her life. Wondery's Breaking Silence will explore the psychological aftermath of trafficking survivors, using Giuffre's personal narratives as a central thread. On public radio, NPR's Embedded plans a special report from Western Australia, where local journalists are piecing together rural perspectives on both her advocacy work and her final days. These media projects not only revisit her story, but also spotlight the evolving conversation about trauma, power, and the public's right to know. Academic and psychological insights, scholars in forensic psychology and trauma studies are examining Giuffre's case as well. A forthcoming article in the Journal of Interpersonal Violence will analyze her public statements and legal testimonies through the lens of post-traumatic growth theory, arguing that her ability to transform personal tragedy into systemic change exemplifies resilience at its highest order. At the University of Western Australia, A multidisciplinary symposium scheduled for June will gather experts in law, psychology, and sociology to debate best practices for supporting high-profile survivors, drawing directly from SOAR's methodologies and Giuffre's counseling protocols. Clinical practitioners have also weighed in. Dr. Helena Marks, a trauma specialist at Perth Children's Hospital, published an op-ed calling for expanded access to specialist mental health services in rural regions. She credited Virginia's advocacy with elevating the conversation about complex post-traumatic stress disorders and urged governments to allocate funding specifically for long-term support of trafficking survivors, philanthropic and legislative. Mobilization. Giuffre's death has spurred a surge in donations to anti-trafficking organizations. SOAR itself reported a 250% increase in online contributions within 48 hours of the news, with major gifts from private foundations in the US, UK, and Australia. The Clinton Foundation and the MacArthur Foundation have each pledged grants earmarked for expanding SOAR's educational outreach, while several corporate social responsibility arms, most notably Airbnb.org and Cisco's Networking Academy, have announced partnerships to develop training modules on recognizing and reporting trafficking in hospitality and technology sectors. On the legislative front, the Epstein Accountability Act, co-sponsored by Senator Lindsey Graham and Reps. Nancy Pelosi, has gained additional backing. An amendment proposed by Reps. Jackie Speier would mandate a federal registry for individuals convicted of organizing underage trafficking networks, akin to sex offender registries. In Australia, Senator Dorinda Cox has co-authored a bill requiring courts to appoint independent advocates for trafficking victims in family law proceedings, a direct response to Virginia's experiences with restraining order litigation. Tributes, memorials, and annual observances. Communities worldwide are planning annual observances in Giuffre's honor. In Near Gabby, local councils have unanimously voted to rename the community hall Giuffre House, dedicating it as a center for survivor, support groups, and wellness workshops. In London, the Victims and Prisoners Memorial Trust announced it will add her name to a commemorative wall in Westminster Abbey, joining a roster of individuals who fought against institutional injustice. Meanwhile, June 23rd has unofficially become Giuffre Day on social media, selected to coincide with the anniversary of Maxwell's 2021 conviction. Grassroots organizers in major cities will host candlelight vigils, panel discussions, and letter-writing campaigns to legislators, urging them to uphold her vision of survivor-led policymaking. These events not only keep her memory alive, but also ensure that her mission remains at the forefront of public discourse. Private writings and unfinished projects. Before her death, Virginia was reportedly drafting a memoir, tentatively titled Breaking the Silence, that would chronicle her earliest days with Epstein through her ascent as an international advocate. Excerpts obtained by The Guardian suggest she planned to reveal her rawest emotions: the guilt of feeling complicit as a teenager, the fear during courtroom cross-examinations, and the fragile hope that sustained her. Her literary agent has confirmed the existence of a completed manuscript, with plans for publication in late 2025, proceeds of which will fund SOAR's scholarship initiatives. She was also working on a digital archive, an encrypted, cloud-based repository to house interviews, legal documents, and confidential survivor testimonies. Developers involved say the platform was designed with peer review protections, ensuring only verified survivors and researchers could access sensitive materials. Now, an advisory board comprising representatives from SOAR, the International Justice Mission, and the Australian Centre to Counter Modern Slavery must decide how to preserve and launch the archive without compromising privacy or legal integrity. How you can help Virginia Giuffre's story is a call to action. You can support survivors by donating to SOAR or other accredited organizations providing direct trauma care, advocating for legislative reforms in your region. Contact your representatives about the Epstein Accountability Act or similar bills. Educating yourself and others. Share verified information, watch upcoming documentaries, and attend public forums. Volunteering with local shelters or helplines. Many NGOs need mentors, translators, and administrative support. Every voice uplifted, every dollar donated, and every policy strengthened is a tribute to Virginia's unwavering belief that survivors deserve justice and that silence is never an option. Closing reflection. Virginia Giuffre transformed her pain into purpose, challenging institutions that long ignored victims of sexual, Violence. Her death has reopened wounds, yes, but it also reignites the urgency to act. Whether through media, legislation, philanthropy, or personal advocacy, we each carry a spark of her relentless drive. As you reflect on her journey, from a frightened teenager to a global beacon, ask yourself, what will I do to ensure that no survivor ever feels alone again? Share your thoughts below, pledge your support, and stay engaged. This story and this fight are far from over. In the wake of Virginia Giuffre's tragic passing, the ripples of her life and death are still spreading outward. Through courtrooms, parliamentary chambers, survivors' homes, and social media feeds worldwide. Here's an even deeper dive into the forces she confronted, the networks she exposed, and the work still left undone. Unmasking the network, beyond Epstein and Maxwell. From the gilded halls of Miami to the secluded safety of private islands, Jeffrey Epstein's inner circle extended far beyond himself and Ghislaine Maxwell. Flight logs revealed dozens of VIPs, CEOs, politicians, academics, who boarded the Lolita Express without facing scrutiny. Survivors have named pilots, estate managers, and lawyers as enablers who facilitated travel and silenced victims. Each redacted name in those files is more than a blank space. It's a potential witness, an unspoken story. Giuffre's testimony forced investigators to reckon with the idea that vast, well-funded networks were in place to groom minors, and that dismantling these rings requires more than charging a few ringleaders. We now know that trafficking syndicates exploit legal loopholes in international tax havens, hire private security firms to guard their perimeters, and bribe local officials to turn a blind eye. Virginia's activism shone a spotlight on this infrastructure, but the full scope of the network remains obscured by sequestered documents and unsettled court cases. Documentaries and the digital age, shaping perception, long before mainstream. Outlets caught up, Giuffre's story found a home online. YouTube exposés, viral TikTok testimonies, and grassroots podcasts gave survivors a platform outside traditional media gatekeepers. The Emmy-nominated series, Surviving Jeffrey Epstein, became a turning point, humanizing statistics through first-person accounts. Documentarians traveled to near Gabby to capture B-roll of Virginia teaching workshops for survivors, footage that later became part of a global narrative about resilience. Social media algorithms, however, can be a double-edged sword. They amplify both powerful testimonies and lurid conspiracy theories. While millions watched Virginia's interviews to learn about trafficking, some viewers were funneled into echo chambers claiming her bus crash was a government setup. In the months before her death, she struggled publicly with the weight of being both an icon and a target. Every share of her story brought new support, but also fresh threats. Survivor voices, stories beyond Virginia. Giuffre always insisted. She spoke not just for herself, but for the 40 million survivors who cannot speak. Since 2019, dozens of other women have come forward with similar allegations against Epstein's associates, some filing sealed affidavits, others testifying under pseudonyms. In 2023, a coalition of survivors delivered a petition with $25,000 signatures to the U.S. Capitol, calling for a dedicated trafficking investigations unit. In Australia, the anti-slavery NGO Unchained launched the Voices Unbound campaign, documenting 120 survivor stories in collaboration with SOAR. Each narrative echoed recurring themes: coercion under the guise of mentorship, threats of violence, or financial ruin, and the crushing isolation of being disbelieved. Virginia's decision to go public paved the way for these voices to be heard, but also exposed them to the same dangers she faced. Protecting them now requires robust witness protection protocols and cross-border cooperation that remain in their infancy. Policy and legal reforms. Road ahead. Giuffre's advocacy spurred lawmakers to draft new bills on 3 continents. In the U.S., the proposed Survivor Protection Act would bar confidential settlements in trafficking cases and require mandatory reporting of any plea deals involving sex abuse charges. The Global Trafficking Accountability Treaty, introduced in the European Parliament this spring, seeks to harmonize trafficking definitions, mandate asset forfeiture across borders, and establish a centralized victim compensation fund. Australia's Modern Slavery Amendment Bill aims to toughen penalties for corporate complicity and enforce annual public disclosures on supply chain audits. Yet none of these measures have cleared both houses of their respective legislatures. Opponents cite concerns about privacy, due process, and the administrative burden on nonprofits. Virginia predicted this inertia, warning in a 2022 speech, "Change arrives not on the calendar but on the backs of the persistent, those who refuse to accept no for an answer." The broader context: Epstein, power, and impunity. Epstein's first arrest in 2006 barely dented his network's armor, a reality Giuffre decried as evidence of systemic impunity. Epstein's 2008 plea deal, negotiated in secret with then U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, revealed how political connections can override justice. Acosta later resigned from the Trump administration amid criticism over the deal. In the UK, allegations that high-ranking officials met with Epstein on his private jet prompted internal inquiries, though none led to prosecutions. This pattern, well-funded elites leveraging influence to evade accountability, underscores one of Giuffre's most searing observations. Traffickers don't act alone. They hide behind the respectability of those who serve them. Remembering. The Survivors. A Living Legacy. On June 1st, survivors and advocates will gather for Global Justice Day, an annual event co-founded by SOAR. This year's keynote will honor Virginia's memory, featuring testimonies from those she mentored and the premiere of a new short film documenting her farm-based healing programs. Grassroots chapters across 5 continents will hold solidarity marches, vigils, and fundraising drives. Schools in Florida are integrating age-appropriate modules on consent and exploitation into their curricula, a direct result of SOAR's educational outreach. Each of these initiatives carries a fragment of Virginia's vision, transforming personal trauma into communal action. Closing thoughts. The price of truth. Virginia Giuffre paid a steep price for speaking truth to power. She faced courtrooms packed with cameras, media firestorms, and anonymous threats. Yet she never wavered from her conviction that survivors deserve dignity, justice, and a platform to be heard. Her death is a profound loss, but her life's work has seeded a movement that cannot be uprooted. The coming months will test whether governments, NGOs, and civil society can honor her sacrifice by enacting meaningful reforms, or whether history will record her as another martyr lost to institutional inertia. Your voice matters. If Virginia's story moved you, use your platform, social media, community groups, or workplace discussions to keep the conversation alive. Reach out to your representatives about pending legislation. Support survivor-led organizations with your time, donations, or skills. And most importantly, listen. Every survivor's experience is a crucial thread in the tapestry she began to weave. Share your thoughts below and help turn heartbreak into hope. Because if Virginia Giuffre taught us anything, it's that silence is complicit, and that collective action is the antidote. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. And that's the story so far. Virginia Giuffre's life, her courage, and the questions her death has left behind. If you found this deep dive illuminating, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an update. We're tracking every development, from court hearings and document releases to survivor stories and legislative battles, so check back often. Your support helps keep these important conversations alive. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and I'll see you in the comments.